Before we dive into this incredible story that changed my entire perspective on standing up for what's right, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you're going to want to follow along for this wild ride that proves sometimes the little guy really can win against bullies in power. Picture this, I'm standing in my brand new driveway, boxes scattered everywhere, when three official-looking people march up to me with clipboards and serious faces. The woman in front, wearing a bright yellow vest like she owns the entire neighborhood, looks me dead in the eye and says, "Sir, you're in violation of 17 different HOA rules, and we're issuing you a fine of $8,000. You have 24 hours to pay or we'll start legal action." My jaw dropped. $8,000. I had literally just pulled into my driveway 15 minutes ago. But here's the thing they didn't know, and this is where the story gets absolutely crazy. I wasn't just any new homeowner. I was the person who had been collecting their rent checks for the past 3 years. That's right, I owned the building where their precious HOA office was located, and they had no idea they were trying to scam their own landlord. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this whole adventure started, because what happened next will blow your mind. It all began 6 months earlier when I decided it was time to buy my dream house. I'd been working 2 jobs for years. During the day, I managed rental properties for my small real estate company, and at night, I delivered food to save every penny I could. My mom always taught me that hard work and treating people with kindness would eventually pay off, even when times got tough. The house I fell in love with was in a neighborhood called Sunset Grove. It wasn't the fanciest place, but it had something special: big oak trees lining every street, kids playing in their front yards, and neighbors who actually waved at each other. The house itself was a cozy 2-story with blue shutters and a little garden in the front. The moment I saw it, I knew it was meant to be my home. But buying a house isn't easy when you're not rich. I spent months filling out paperwork, getting inspections done, and crossing my fingers that everything would work out. The real estate agent, Mrs. Patterson, was incredibly kind. She helped me understand all the confusing legal stuff and even stayed late at her office to make sure my offer was perfect. "Tommy," she said one afternoon as we sat in her office, "I can see how much this house means to you. You remind me of my own son, hardworking and honest. I'm going to do everything I can to help you get this place." And she did. When the sellers tried to back out at the last minute because they got a higher offer, Mrs. Patterson fought for me. She explained to them that I had been saving for this house for 3 years and had never missed a deadline or caused any problems. Something about her words must have touched their hearts because they decided to stick with our original agreement. The day I got the call that the house was officially mine, I actually cried. Not sad tears, but happy ones. I called my mom immediately, and she started crying too. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she said. "Your father would be proud too. You worked so hard for this." My dad had passed away when I was 16, and buying this house felt like honoring his memory. He always said that having a place to call your own was one of life's greatest blessings, and now I finally understood what he meant. The moving day was set for a beautiful Saturday in October. I had rented a small truck and asked my best friends Jake and Maria to help me move. We started early in the morning, loading up all my furniture and boxes of belongings. It wasn't much: a couch my mom gave me, a dining table I bought at a garage sale, and lots of books, but it was mine. The drive to Sunset Grove took about 30 minutes. As we pulled into the neighborhood, I felt butterflies in my stomach. This was really happening. I was about to become a homeowner in a place that looked like something from a movie, with its perfect lawns and matching mailboxes. "Dude, this place is nice," Jake said from the passenger seat. "Look at all these houses. They're like something from a magazine." Maria, who was following us in her car, honked her horn and gave us a thumbs up through her window. She was just as excited as I was. When we turned onto Maple Street, my heart started beating faster. There it was, house number 247, with its blue shutters and the little garden I was already planning to expand. The moving truck pulled into the driveway, and I just sat there for a moment, taking it all in. "This is it," I whispered to myself. "This is really it." We started unloading the truck, and I have to say, my new neighbors seemed pretty friendly at first. The lady across the street, Mrs. Henderson, came over with a plate of fresh-baked cookies and introduced herself. She was in her 70s, with gray hair and the kindest smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood, dear," she said. "I've been living here for 42 years, and I can tell you, it's a wonderful place to call home. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to ask." The family next door, the Johnsons, also came over to say hello. They had 2 little kids who were fascinated by the moving truck and kept asking if they could help carry boxes. Their parents seemed really nice too, offering to let me borrow tools if I needed them and telling me about the best places to shop nearby. "There's a great farmer's market every Saturday morning just 10 minutes from here," Mrs. Johnson said. "And the hardware store downtown has everything you could ever need for house projects. The owner, Mr. Pete, is super helpful." Everything was going perfectly. The weather was beautiful, my friends were making the moving process fun by telling jokes and playing music, and my new neighbors were welcoming me with open arms. I remember thinking to myself, this is what community feels like. We had been working for about 3 hours when we decided to take a lunch break. I had packed sandwiches for everyone, and we sat on my new front porch, eating and laughing about how we almost dropped my dresser going up the stairs. "So what's next on the agenda?" Maria asked, taking a bite of her sandwich. "Well, I need to set up the utilities, figure out which room is going to be my office, and maybe plant some flowers in that garden," I said, pointing to the small flower bed near the front walkway. "Don't forget you need to register with the HOA," Jake added. "My cousin lives in a neighborhood like this, and they're pretty strict about that stuff." I nodded. The real estate agent had mentioned something about a homeowners association, but honestly, I hadn't paid much attention to it. I figured it was just some group that made sure everyone kept their lawns neat and didn't paint their houses crazy colors. "Yeah, I got some paperwork about that," I said. "I'll deal with it next week once I get settled in." That turned out to be a big mistake. We finished lunch and got back to unloading the truck. There were still quite a few boxes to bring in, including all my kitchen stuff and my home office equipment. I was carrying a particularly heavy box labeled books when I noticed a small group of people walking down the street. At first, I didn't think much of it. Neighbors out for a walk on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, totally normal. But as they got closer, I realized they were all wearing matching yellow vests and carrying clipboards. They looked very official and very serious. "Is that the new homeowner?" I heard one of them say to another. "Must be," came the reply. "Look at all that moving activity." They started walking faster, heading straight toward my house. My friends noticed them too. "Who are those people?" Maria asked, setting down the box she was carrying. "I have no idea," I said, but something in my stomach told me this wasn't going to be a friendly welcome visit. The group consisted of 3 people, 2 women and 1 man. The woman in front was tall with short blonde hair and carried herself like she was in charge of something important. The other woman was shorter with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, and she kept scribbling notes on her clipboard. The man looked like he was probably in his 50s, with a mustache and glasses that made him look like a school principal. They marched right up to my driveway like they owned the place. "Excuse me," the blonde woman called out in a voice that was anything but friendly. "Are you the new resident of 247, Maple Street?" "Yes, that's me," I replied, setting down my box and walking over to them. "I'm Tommy. Nice to meet you." I extended my hand for a handshake, but none of them took it. Instead, they all looked at each other and then back at me with expressions that could have frozen water. "I'm Margaret Walsh, president of the Sunset Grove Homeowners Association," the blonde woman announced. "This is Sandra Mills, our compliance officer, and Robert Chin, our violations coordinator." The way she said their titles made it sound like they were running the FBI instead of a neighborhood group. "We need to discuss some serious matters with you immediately," Margaret continued. "Okay," I said, confused. "What kind of matters?" Sandra stepped forward with her clipboard. "We've conducted a preliminary inspection of your property, and we've identified multiple violations that need to be addressed immediately." "Violations?" I asked. "But I just got here. I haven't even finished moving in yet." That's irrelevant, Robert said sternly. HOA rules apply from the moment you take ownership of the property. Ignorance is not an excuse. Jake and Maria had stopped what they were doing and were now standing behind me. I could feel their support, which was comforting because this whole situation was making me really uncomfortable. What violations are you talking about? I asked, trying to stay calm and polite. Margaret pulled out her own clipboard and began reading from it like she was announcing criminal charges. Violation number 1, your moving truck is parked in such a way that it extends beyond the approved driveway boundaries. Violation number 2, you have boxes and furniture visible from the street, which violates our aesthetic standards. Violation number 3, your lawn has not been maintained to HOA specifications. Wait a minute, I interrupted. I literally just bought this house. The previous owners left it exactly like this. And of course I have boxes visible, I'm moving in. Violation number 4, Sandra continued as if I hadn't spoken, you failed to submit a moving notification form 72 hours in advance. Violation number 5, you do not have the required HOA welcome packet displayed prominently in your front window. This was getting ridiculous. I didn't even know about a welcome packet, I said. Violation number 6, Robert chimed in, your friend's vehicles are parked on the street without visitor permits. I looked over at Maria's car, which was parked perfectly legally on the public street in front of my house. That's a public street, I said. Since when do people need permits to park on a public street? Since the HOA implemented parking regulations to maintain property values, Margaret replied coldly. They kept going. Apparently, my garden hose was the wrong color, my mailbox had a small scratch that needed to be repaired, and I was supposed to have submitted a landscaping intention form before moving in. By the time they finished reading their list, they had identified 17 different violations. 17. And I had been in my house for less than 4 hours. This is insane, Maria whispered to me. The total fine for these violations comes to $8,000, Margaret announced with a satisfied smile. $8,000. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's correct. And according to HOA bylaws, all fines must be paid within 24 hours, or we will begin legal proceedings to place a lien on your property. The world seemed to spin around me. $8,000 was more money than I had in my entire savings account. I had just spent every penny I had on the down payment and closing costs for the house. This can't be legal, Jake said, stepping forward. You can't fine someone for moving into their own house. I assure you, everything we're doing is completely legal and within our authority as the elected HOA board, Margaret replied. Mr. Tommy here agreed to abide by all HOA rules and regulations when he purchased this property. But I haven't even seen these rules, I protested. That's your responsibility, Sandra said. All homeowners are required to familiarize themselves with HOA guidelines before taking residence. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. These people were acting like I had committed serious crimes when all I had done was move into my own house. My friends looked just as shocked as I felt. Look, I said, trying to reason with them, I understand you have rules, and I'm happy to follow them. But some of these violations are completely unavoidable. I can't help that I'm moving in, and I can't control what the previous owners did to the lawn. Rules are rules, Robert said firmly. No exceptions. What if I fix everything right now? I asked desperately. I can move the truck, put the boxes inside, get visitor permits for my friends. Whatever you need. Margaret shook her head. The violations have already been issued. Correcting them now doesn't eliminate the fines. This is ridiculous. Maria exploded. You people are nothing but bullies. I'd watch your tone if I were you, Margaret said, turning her icy stare toward Maria. Disruptive behavior by guests reflects poorly on the homeowner and can result in additional fines. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in an angry way, but in a "this ends now" kind of way. These people were trying to intimidate and take advantage of me, and I suddenly realized something that made me want to laugh out loud. But I kept my cool. I had to play this smart. You know what? I said calmly. You're absolutely right. I should have been more prepared. I apologize for not knowing about all these rules. Margaret looked surprised by my sudden cooperation. Well, that's more like it. I just have one question, I continued. Where exactly is your HOA office located? I'd like to come in person on Monday to discuss a payment plan for these fines. Our office is at 1247, Commerce Street, Suite 200, Sandra replied proudly. We're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I nodded seriously. 1247, Commerce Street, Suite 200. Got it. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that 1247, Commerce Street was a building I knew very, very well. In fact, I had been collecting rent from the tenants in that building for the past 3 years. Including Suite 200. Including the Sunset Grove Homeowners Association. These people who were trying to scam me out of $8,000 had been paying rent to my company for years, and I was the one who personally collected their monthly checks. Not only that, but they were currently 3 months behind on their rent, and I had been trying to reach them for weeks to discuss their overdue payments. But I wasn't going to tell them that. Not yet. I had a much better plan. Well, thank you for this information, I said politely. I'll definitely be in touch very soon. Margaret handed me a formal-looking document with all the violations listed. This is your official notice. Remember, 24 hours to pay, or we start legal action. Oh, don't worry, I replied with a smile. You'll be hearing from me much sooner than that. They turned and walked away, looking very pleased with themselves. They probably thought they had just scared some poor new homeowner into paying them thousands of dollars for made-up violations. If only they knew what was coming. As soon as they were out of sight, Jake, Maria, and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. Tommy, Maria said, you look like you just won the lottery. What aren't you telling us? Oh, you're going to love this, I said, still grinning. Remember how I told you guys I manage rental properties for work? Yeah, Jake replied. Well, guess where our HOA friends have their office? But before I could explain the beautiful irony of the situation, something else happened that made this day even more interesting. Mrs. Henderson from across the street came hurrying over, looking very upset. Tommy, dear, I am so sorry about what just happened, she said, slightly out of breath. I saw those awful people bothering you, and I had to come over. It's okay, Mrs. Henderson, I said. They're just doing their job, I guess. No, they're not, she exclaimed. What they did to you is exactly what they've been doing to everyone in this neighborhood for months. They're bullies, and they're making up rules that don't even exist. That got my attention. What do you mean? Mrs. Henderson looked around nervously, as if she was afraid someone might be listening. Can we talk inside? There's a lot you need to know about what's really going on in Sunset Grove. As we walked toward my front door, I had no idea that what Mrs. Henderson was about to tell me would change everything I thought I knew about this situation. The day had already been full of surprises, but the biggest shock was still coming. And it was going to make Monday morning very, very interesting for Margaret, Sandra, and Robert. Mrs. Henderson led us into my living room, which was still filled with boxes and furniture we hadn't organized yet. She sat down on my couch and took a deep breath before speaking. Tommy, what I'm about to tell you might sound unbelievable, but I need you to know the truth about what's been happening in our neighborhood, she began, her hands shaking slightly. Margaret Walsh and her little group aren't really running a legitimate HOA operation. They're running a scam. I sat down across from her, and Jake and Maria gathered around to listen. This was getting more interesting by the minute. What do you mean? I asked. Mrs. Henderson pulled out a thick folder from her purse. 3 months ago, Margaret and her friends showed up claiming they had been elected to run our HOA. But here's the thing, we never had an election. In fact, most of us didn't even know we needed an HOA until they started demanding money from everyone. She opened the folder and showed me dozens of documents, fake violation notices, made-up fine letters, and official-looking papers that were completely bogus. They've been going house to house, intimidating people and collecting thousands of dollars in fake fines, Mrs. Henderson continued. Mrs. Rodriguez down the street paid them $4,000 because they threatened to foreclose on her house. The young couple at the end of the block, the Williamses, gave them $6,000 because Margaret convinced them their fence was illegally placed. My jaw dropped. And nobody reported them to the police. We tried, Mrs. Henderson said sadly. But they're very clever. They have official-looking documents, they know all the legal terminology, and they target people who don't know any better. The police said it was a civil matter and told us to hire lawyers. But most of us can't afford lawyers. Maria leaned forward. So they're just stealing money from people by pretending to be an HOA? Exactly. And the worst part is, they specifically target new homeowners and elderly residents because we're the most vulnerable, Mrs. Henderson explained. They figured out that new people don't know the neighborhood rules yet, and older folks like me get scared when official-looking people show up with legal threats. I thought about what she was telling me, and it made perfect sense. That's why they had shown up so quickly after I arrived, they were watching for new residents to scam. Mrs. Henderson, you said they collect thousands of dollars from people. Where does all that money go? I asked. That's what we've been trying to figure out, she replied. They claim it goes into a community fund for neighborhood improvements, but we've never seen any improvements. No new streetlights, no road repairs, no community events, nothing. Jake shook his head in disbelief. This is like something out of a movie. How have they gotten away with this for so long? Because they're smart about it, Mrs. Henderson said. They don't hit the same house twice, they space out their visits so people don't compare notes, and they make everyone feel like they're the only ones having problems. It's psychological manipulation. I was getting angrier by the minute, but I also felt a surge of excitement. These people had no idea they had just messed with someone who could actually do something about their scam. Mrs. Henderson, I said carefully, what if I told you I might be able to help stop them? Her eyes lit up with hope. Oh, Tommy, if there's anything you can do, the whole neighborhood would be so grateful. We've been living in fear for months. Well, let me ask you something. Do you know anything about their office space? Like, do they own the building, or do they rent it? They definitely rent it, she said. Margaret is always bragging about how professional their office looks, but she also complains about how expensive the rent is. Why do you ask? I smiled. Because I think Monday morning is going to be very educational for everyone involved. But before I could explain further, Jake's phone started buzzing with text messages. Guys, he said, looking at his screen with concern, my cousin David just texted me. He lives about 10 minutes from here, and he said some HOA people just showed up at his house too. What? Mrs. Henderson gasped. They're hitting other neighborhoods now. Jake read the messages out loud. David says 3 people in yellow vests just fined him $5,000 for having his garbage cans visible from the street. But get this, it's not even garbage day, and his cans are in his garage. This was escalating quickly. It seemed like Margaret and her crew were expanding their operation beyond Sunset Grove. We need to do something about this right now, Maria said firmly. These people are stealing from families. This has gone way too far. I stood up and started pacing around my living room, thinking. You know what? You're absolutely right. I was going to wait until Monday to handle this, but maybe that's too long. What did you have in mind? Mrs. Henderson asked. Well, I said, sitting back down, I can't tell you all the details yet, but let's just say I have some inside information about their operation that they don't know I have. And I think it's time to use it. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. Mrs. Henderson, you mentioned that people in the neighborhood have been afraid to speak up. What if I told you there was a way to get everyone's money back and make sure these scammers never bother anyone again? I'd say you're a miracle worker, she replied with tears in her eyes. Not a miracle worker, I said with a grin. Just someone who happens to be in the right place at the right time with the right information. I found the number I was looking for and held up my phone. I'm going to make a call that's going to change everything. But first, I need to ask you all to trust me and keep what I'm about to do confidential until tomorrow morning. Can you do that? Everyone nodded eagerly. I dialed the number and put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Peterson Property Management, this is Lisa speaking, how can I help you? Hi Lisa, it's Tommy. I need you to pull up the file for 1247, Commerce Street, Suite 200. Sure thing, Tommy. Give me just a second. I could hear her typing on her keyboard. Okay, I've got it. That's the Sunset Grove HOA account. What do you need to know? Mrs. Henderson's eyes went wide when she heard the name of the HOA. Can you tell me their current balance? I asked. Oh boy, Lisa said with a sigh. They're 3 months behind. They owe us $4,800 in back rent, and their lease is up for renewal next month. Perfect. And Lisa, do we have their lease agreement on file? Yes, and get this, they signed a personal guarantee. If they default on the lease, Margaret Walsh, Sandra Mills, and Robert Chen are all personally responsible for the full amount. I looked at Mrs. Henderson, Jake, and Maria, who were all staring at me with their mouths open. Lisa, I need you to prepare a formal notice of lease termination due to non-payment. I want it ready first thing Monday morning. You got it, boss. Anything else? Yes, actually. Can you also prepare eviction paperwork? I have a feeling we're going to need it. Will do. Should I schedule the sheriff for Tuesday? Let's see how Monday goes first. I'll call you later tonight with more details. I hung up the phone, and the room was completely silent for several seconds. Finally, Mrs. Henderson spoke up. Tommy, are you telling me that you're their landlord? That's exactly what I'm telling you, I replied. And they just tried to steal $8,000 from the person who holds their lease. Jake started laughing so hard he nearly fell off his chair. This is the best plot twist ever. They tried to scam their own landlord. But wait, Maria said, it gets even better. They owe him money too. Almost $5,000, I confirmed. And their lease is up next month, which means I have the right to choose whether or not to renew it. Mrs. Henderson looked like she was about to cry again, but this time from relief. Does this mean you can stop them? Mrs. Henderson, by this time tomorrow, Margaret Walsh and her fake HOA are going to be nothing but a bad memory. But even as I said those words, I knew this situation was about to get much more complicated. Because at that exact moment, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered it, I heard a voice that made my blood run cold. Is this Tommy? The voice asked. Yes, who is this? This is Margaret Walsh. I think you and I need to have a little chat. My friends and Mrs. Henderson all looked at me with concern. How had Margaret gotten my phone number? And more importantly, what did she want to talk about? What can I do for you, Margaret? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, it seems there's been some confusion about your fines today. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I've decided to be generous. If you pay me $6,000 instead of $8,000, we can call it even. That's very generous of you, I said sarcastically. I thought so. But here's the thing, Tommy. I've done some research on you since we met this afternoon, and I discovered some very interesting information. My heart started beating faster. What could she possibly have found out about me? What kind of information? I asked. Let's just say I know more about your business than you think I do. And I think you know more about mine than you're letting on. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Mrs. Henderson, Jake, and Maria were all staring at me with worried expressions. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Margaret. Oh, I think you do. Which is why I'm going to make you a different offer. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and we can discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. What kind of arrangement? The kind where we both walk away from this situation without any problems. Because Tommy, I think you'll find that I'm not just good at collecting HOA fines. I'm also very good at making problems disappear for people who cooperate with me. That sounded an awful lot like a threat. And if I don't want to cooperate? I asked. Well, let's just say that new homeowners can face all sorts of unexpected problems. Permit issues, inspection failures, mysterious property damage, things like that. It would be a shame if your beautiful new house became more trouble than it's worth. Now I was really angry. Not only was she running a scam, but she was threatening to damage my property if I didn't pay her. I'll think about it, I said. Don't think too long, Tommy. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. She hung up, and I sat there staring at my phone. What was that all about? Jake asked. I think Margaret Walsh is a lot more dangerous than we realized, I replied. Mrs. Henderson looked terrified. Tommy, maybe you should just pay her the money. If she's threatening your house. No way, I said firmly. I'm not giving these criminals 1 penny. But this does change things. How? Maria asked. Well, originally I was just planning to evict them and expose their scam. But now that she's threatening me and trying to blackmail me, I think it's time to involve some other people. I picked up my phone again and dialed another number. Detective Rodriguez, this is Tommy Chen. I need to report a criminal conspiracy involving fraud, extortion, and threats of property damage. Mrs. Henderson gasped. You're calling the police? I nodded. Margaret Walsh just made a huge mistake. She went from running a simple scam to making direct threats against me. That's a felony. Detective Rodriguez had been a friend of my father's, and I had known him since I was a kid. He was one of the good cops, the kind who actually cared about protecting people from criminals. Tommy, good to hear from you. What's going on? I explained the entire situation to him, the fake HOA, the fraudulent fines, the threats against my property, and the fact that they owed me money for rent. This is definitely criminal behavior, Detective Rodriguez confirmed. Can you come down to the station tonight to file a formal report? Absolutely. What do you need from me? Bring any documentation you have about their rent payments, the lease agreement, and any recordings if you have them. Also, see if your neighbors can come in to give statements about the money they've paid to these people. Mrs. Henderson immediately volunteered. I'll call everyone in the neighborhood. We've all been waiting for someone to help us fight back. Perfect, Detective Rodriguez said. Tommy, this sounds like organized fraud, which is a serious felony. If we can prove they've been systematically targeting residents, we're looking at multiple charges for each of them. After I hung up with Detective Rodriguez, the mood in the room had completely changed. What started as a simple moving day had turned into a major criminal investigation. I can't believe this is really happening, Mrs. Henderson said, shaking her head. For months, we've felt so helpless. And now, in one afternoon, everything might finally change. It's going to change, I assured her. But we need to be smart about this. Margaret clearly knows more than she was letting on earlier. We need to be prepared for her to try something desperate. Jake looked concerned. What do you mean? Well, think about it. She somehow got my phone number, which means she's been investigating me. She knows I have some connection to her business, even if she doesn't know exactly what it is. And now she's making threats. So what do we do? Maria asked. We stick to the plan, but we're extra careful. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to show up at her office with Detective Rodriguez and some backup. We're going to catch her in the act of trying to extort money from me, and then we're going to shut down her entire operation. Mrs. Henderson smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. Tommy, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Henderson. This is what neighbors do for each other. My mom always taught me that when you see someone being bullied, you stand up for them. Your mother raised a good man, she said. As the evening went on, we finished unloading the moving truck and got my house somewhat organized. Mrs. Henderson went home to start calling the other neighbors who had been victimized by the fake HOA. Jake and Maria helped me set up my bedroom and kitchen so I could at least live comfortably while we waited for tomorrow's confrontation. Around 8 o'clock, Detective Rodriguez called me back. Tommy, I've got some interesting news. I ran Margaret Walsh's name through our system, and it turns out she's got a history. What kind of history? She was arrested 2 years ago in another state for running a similar scam. The charges were dropped because the victims didn't want to testify, but the pattern is identical: fake HOA violations, elderly targets, threats of legal action. So she's a professional con artist. Looks like it. And get this, Sandra Mills and Robert Chen were both involved in that case too. They're a team. This was even worse than I had thought. These weren't just local criminals trying to make some quick money. They were experienced fraudsters who had done this before. Detective, what happens if they decide to disappear before tomorrow morning? That's why I'm posting an officer outside their office building tonight. If they try to clear out, we'll know about it. And what about my house? Margaret threatened to damage my property. I'm sending a patrol car by your place every hour tonight. If anyone shows up who doesn't belong there, we'll know immediately. I felt a lot better knowing that the police were taking this seriously and protecting both me and the evidence we needed to stop these criminals. But around 10 o'clock that night, just as I was getting ready for bed, something happened that made me realize Margaret Walsh was even more dangerous than any of us had imagined. I was in my kitchen making a cup of tea when I noticed flashing lights outside my window. I looked out and saw a police car parked in my driveway, and Detective Rodriguez was walking up to my front door. I opened the door before he could knock. "Detective, what's wrong?" "Tommy, we have a problem. Margaret Walsh and her crew didn't wait until tomorrow. They tried to break into your rental office building about an hour ago." "What? Why would they do that?" "We think they were trying to destroy the evidence of their unpaid rent and forge new lease documents. Fortunately, our officer saw them and scared them off before they could get inside." "Did you arrest them?" "That's the problem. By the time backup arrived, they had disappeared. And Tommy, we found something in the parking lot that concerns me." He handed me a plastic evidence bag containing a piece of paper. I read it, and my blood ran cold. It was a handwritten note that said, "Tommy Chen, 247, Maple Street. Problem eliminated by Tuesday. $50,000 payment due Wednesday." "What does this mean?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "It looks like Margaret Walsh isn't just running a small-time HOA scam. We think she's connected to some much more serious criminals. And Tommy, it appears they've put a contract out on you." The room started spinning around me. "A contract? Like, to hurt me?" "Detective, are you saying they want to kill me?" "We don't know for sure, but we're not taking any chances. I'm putting you in protective custody until we can find these people and figure out exactly what they're planning." "Protective custody? But what about the confrontation tomorrow morning? What about catching them and getting everyone's money back?" "Tommy, your safety is more important than catching criminals. We'll find another way to stop them." But as I stood there in my doorway, looking at that terrifying note, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't going to run away and hide while Margaret Walsh and her crew terrorized my neighbors and threatened innocent people. I had started this fight, and I was going to finish it. "Detective Rodriguez," I said firmly, "I appreciate the offer of protection, but I'm not going into hiding." "Tommy, you don't understand how serious this is." "No, you don't understand how serious this is," I interrupted. "These people have been stealing money from elderly neighbors and young families for months. They've terrorized people who were just trying to live peacefully in their homes. And now they think they can scare me into backing down by making threats." "Tommy." "Detective, my father taught me that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. If I hide now, they win. And if they win, they'll just keep hurting people." Detective Rodriguez looked at me for a long moment. "Your father would be proud of you, but he'd also want you to be safe. Then help me be safe while I do the right thing. What do you have in mind?" "Tomorrow morning, we're still going to confront them at their office. But instead of going in alone, I want you and your entire team there. We're going to catch them red-handed trying to extort money from me, and then we're going to arrest them for everything, the fraud, the threats, the attempted break-in, everything." Detective Rodriguez smiled. "You know what, Tommy? That's exactly what your father would have said. So you'll do it?" "We'll do it. But we're doing it my way, with maximum security and backup. These people have already proven they're willing to escalate to violence. As Detective Rodriguez left to coordinate with his team, I sat down in my living room and looked around at my new house. 12 hours ago, I had been so excited to start my new life in this beautiful neighborhood. Now I was involved in a criminal investigation and potentially in danger from professional con artists. But you know what? I wasn't scared anymore. I was determined. Margaret Walsh and her crew had made a huge mistake when they decided to target my neighborhood. They thought they could intimidate and steal from good people like Mrs. Henderson and the other neighbors who had welcomed me so warmly. They thought wrong. Tomorrow morning was going to be the beginning of the end for their criminal operation. And I was going to make sure that every single person they had stolen from got their money back. But first, I had to survive the night. Around midnight, as I was finally getting ready for bed, I heard a sound outside that made my heart race. It sounded like someone was walking around my house, trying to be quiet but not quite succeeding. I grabbed my phone and crept to the window to look out. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, in the shadow of the big oak tree in my front yard, I saw the outline of a person watching my house. I immediately called Detective Rodriguez. "They're here," I whispered into the phone. "Who's there?" "Someone is watching my house from across the street. I can see them hiding behind the tree. Stay inside and away from the windows. We have units on the way." But as I watched from my darkened living room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The person by the tree was joined by two other figures. And they were all carrying what looked like tools or weapons. Margaret Walsh hadn't been bluffing about making my problems disappear. She had sent people to my house in the middle of the night, and they weren't here to have a conversation. I heard the sound of breaking glass coming from my backyard. They were trying to get into my house. The sound of breaking glass came from my back door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. These people weren't just here to scare me, they were actually breaking into my house in the middle of the night. I crept through my living room, staying low and away from the windows. My phone was in my hand, and I could hear Detective Rodriguez on the other end saying, "Tommy, stay where you are. Do not try to confront them. Units are 3 minutes away." But 3 minutes felt like 3 hours when dangerous criminals were trying to get into your house. I heard footsteps in my kitchen. Someone was definitely inside now. Then I heard a voice, a man's voice, saying, "Check the office. Look for any paperwork about the lease. They weren't just here to hurt me. They were here to steal evidence." I made a decision that was probably really stupid, but I couldn't help myself. I grabbed the baseball bat that Jake had helped me unpack earlier and slowly made my way toward the kitchen. "I know you're in there, Tommy," called a woman's voice. It was Margaret Walsh herself. "Come out and let's talk like civilized people." "Civilized people don't break into other people's houses," I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, civilized people also don't try to destroy other people's businesses," Margaret replied. "You've put us in a very difficult position." I could see the beam of a flashlight moving around my kitchen. There were definitely at least 2 people in there, maybe 3. "Margaret, you're making a huge mistake," I said. "The police are on their way." She laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made my skin crawl. "Tommy, you have no idea who you're dealing with. The police aren't going to help you. We have friends everywhere in this town. What do you want?" I asked. "I want you to forget everything you think you know about our business. I want you to pack up your little moving boxes and find somewhere else to live. And I want you to never mention our conversation to anyone. And if I don't? Well, let's just say that new homeowners face all kinds of dangers. House fires, electrical problems, gas leaks, terrible accidents happen all the time." That was when I got really angry. Not scared angry, but determined angry. This woman was threatening to burn down my house, the house I had worked so hard to buy, the house that meant everything to me. "You know what, Margaret?" I said, standing up straighter. "I think it's time you learned something about the person you're threatening." "What's that supposed to mean?" It means you picked the wrong house to break into. Just then, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world, police sirens getting closer and closer. Margaret must have heard them too, because suddenly there was a lot of scrambling and whispering in my kitchen. "We're leaving," Margaret called out. "But Tommy, this conversation isn't over." I heard my back door slam shut, and then the sound of people running through my backyard. Within seconds, my front yard was lit up with red and blue flashing lights, and Detective Rodriguez was pounding on my front door. "Tommy. Are you okay?" I opened the door, and Detective Rodriguez rushed in with 3 other officers behind him. "They were just here," I said. "They broke in through the back door." Margaret Walsh was here herself. The officers immediately spread out through my house, checking every room. Detective Rodriguez stayed with me in the living room. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No, I'm fine." "But Detective, they weren't just here to scare me. They were looking for paperwork about their lease. They know I'm their landlord." "How is that possible?" "I don't know, but Margaret definitely knows more than she was letting on yesterday." One of the officers came back from the kitchen. "Detective, you need to see this." We followed him to my kitchen, where he was shining his flashlight on my back door. The window was completely shattered, and there were muddy footprints on my floor. "They also left something," the officer said, pointing to my kitchen table. There was another note, this one typed and printed on official-looking letterhead that said, "Sunset Grove Property Management." The note read, "Mr. Chen, your rental property at 1247, Commerce Street has been condemned by the city due to safety violations. All tenants must vacate immediately. Please contact us to discuss transfer of ownership to cover outstanding fines and penalties." Detective Rodriguez read the note and shook his head. "This is completely fake. The city doesn't condemn buildings in the middle of the night, and they certainly don't ask property owners to transfer ownership to pay fines. So what's their plan?" I asked. "I think they're trying to scare you into signing over your building to them. If you did that, they could destroy all the evidence of their unpaid rent and forge new lease documents to make their scam look legitimate." "But that's crazy. Why would I sign over a valuable building because of a fake condemnation notice?" "Because most people don't know it's fake. Margaret and her crew are good at making official-looking documents and using legal language to intimidate people." Another officer came in from outside. "Detective, we found their vehicle abandoned about 2 blocks away. Looks like they had an escape plan." Detective Rodriguez turned to me. "Tommy, I'm sorry, but I really think you should consider protective custody. These people are escalating fast, and they're clearly willing to use violence." I thought about it for a moment. The smart thing to do would probably be to let the police hide me somewhere safe while they hunted down Margaret and her crew. But then I thought about Mrs. Henderson and all the other neighbors who had been terrorized by these criminals for months. I thought about all the elderly people and young families who had paid thousands of dollars in fake fines because they were too scared to fight back. "Detective Rodriguez," I said firmly, "I'm not hiding. We're going to stick with the original plan." "Tommy. No, listen to me. If I disappear now, Margaret wins. She'll just pack up and move to another town, where she'll start scamming innocent people all over again. But if I show up at her office tomorrow morning like we planned, we can catch her trying to extort money from me and arrest her for everything. It's too dangerous. Then make it less dangerous. Bring more officers. Set up surveillance. Do whatever you need to do. But I'm not letting these bullies drive me out of my own home." Detective Rodriguez looked at me for a long moment. "You're just like your father, aren't you?" "I hope so." "Okay. But we're doing this my way. Maximum security, full backup, and the moment things get dangerous, you follow my orders without question. Deal." The rest of the night was spent cleaning up the broken glass and giving statements to the police officers. They also set up a patrol car in my driveway and another one at the end of my street. Around 4 in the morning, Detective Rodriguez got a phone call that changed everything. "Tommy," he said after hanging up, "we just got some very interesting information from Margaret's ex-husband." "Her ex-husband?" "Apparently, he's been watching the news coverage of our investigation, and he decided to come forward. He says Margaret has been running scams like this for years, and he has boxes of evidence that could put her away for a very long time. What kind of evidence? Bank records, fake documents, recordings of her planning other scams, everything. He's agreed to testify against her in exchange for immunity. This was huge. With testimony and evidence from someone who knew Margaret's operation inside and out, we could build a case that would send her to prison for years. There's more, Detective Rodriguez continued. He also told us about a storage unit where Margaret keeps backup copies of all her fake HOA documents. We're getting a warrant to search it right now. So what does this mean for tomorrow? It means we have her dead to rights. Even if tomorrow's operation doesn't go perfectly, we have enough evidence to arrest her and shut down her entire organization. As the sun came up over Sunset Grove, I stood in my kitchen drinking coffee and looking out at my backyard. The broken glass had been cleaned up, and a temporary board covered the window in my back door. In a few hours, I would be walking into Margaret Walsh's office for what would probably be the most important confrontation of my life. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. Mrs. Henderson came over around 7 o'clock with a thermos of coffee and a plate of homemade muffins. "Tommy, dear, I heard about what happened last night. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Henderson. And by the end of today, Margaret Walsh is going to be in jail where she belongs." "I still can't believe you're their landlord," she said, shaking her head. "It's like something out of a movie." "Well, let's hope this movie has a happy ending." At 8:30, Detective Rodriguez arrived with a team of 6 officers. They were all wearing plain clothes so they wouldn't be obvious, but I could see they were well armed and ready for anything. "Okay, Tommy, here's how this is going to work," Detective Rodriguez explained. "You're going to walk into their office exactly like Margaret expects. You'll be wearing a wire so we can hear everything that happens. The moment she asks you for money or makes any kind of threat, we move in. What if she doesn't fall for it? What if she knows it's a trap? Then we arrest her anyway. We have enough evidence from her ex-husband and the storage unit search to charge her with fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. But if we can get her to incriminate herself on tape, it makes the case even stronger." A technician helped me put on the recording device, a tiny microphone that was hidden in my shirt button and a small transmitter that clipped to my belt under my jacket. "Just act natural," the technician said. "Speak normally, and don't worry about the equipment. We'll be able to hear everything." At exactly 9 o'clock, I walked up to the front door of 1247, Commerce Street. It was strange being here as a visitor instead of as the landlord. I had been in this building hundreds of times to check on maintenance issues and collect rent, but I had never actually been to Suite 200. The directory in the lobby listed Sunset Grove HOA in Suite 200, along with several other businesses. I took the elevator to the second floor and walked down the hall to their office. The door had a professional-looking sign that said Sunset Grove Homeowners Association, Margaret Walsh, President. I took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," called Margaret's voice. I opened the door and stepped into what looked like a legitimate business office. There were filing cabinets, a reception desk, and official-looking certificates on the walls. Margaret was sitting behind a large desk, and Sandra and Robert were seated in chairs nearby. "Tommy," Margaret said with a cold smile. "Right on time. Please, have a seat." I sat down in the chair across from her desk, trying to look nervous and intimidated. "I have to say, I'm impressed that you decided to be reasonable," Margaret continued. "It shows maturity." "Well, you made it pretty clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate," I replied. Margaret's smile got wider. "Yes, I think our visit last night helped clarify the situation, didn't it? She had just admitted on tape to breaking into my house. Now, let's discuss the terms of our agreement," she continued. "You're going to pay us the $6,000 we discussed, and in exchange, we're going to forget about all your violations." "What about the threats to my property?" "What threats?" Margaret asked innocently. "I don't recall making any threats." "Do you recall making any threats, Sandra?" "No threats at all," Sandra replied. "We're simply here to discuss HOA business." They were being careful not to admit to anything too serious while we were in the office. But Margaret's ego was about to get the better of her. Of course, Margaret continued, as a new resident, you should understand that homeowners who don't cooperate with the HOA sometimes face challenges. What kind of challenges? Oh, you know. Permit problems, inspection issues, problems with city services. It's amazing how many bureaucratic obstacles can appear when certain people make phone calls. She was admitting to using her connections to harass homeowners who didn't pay her fake fines. And there's always the issue of property values, Robert added. Homes in neighborhoods with troubled residents tend to lose value quickly. What do you mean by troubled residents? I asked. Well, when word gets out that someone is difficult to work with, it affects the entire community, Margaret explained. People talk. Real estate agents hear things. It can make a house very difficult to sell. Now she was admitting to a campaign of harassment designed to drive people out of their homes. But none of that will be a problem if you just pay what you owe, Sandra said sweetly. $6,000, I said. That's right. Cash, preferably. We can wait while you go to the bank. And if I pay you, all my problems go away. Completely, Margaret assured me. You'll be in good standing with the HOA, and we'll make sure you never have any problems with permits or inspections or anything like that. She was now admitting to taking bribes and promising to use her influence corruptly. There's just one thing I don't understand, I said. What's that? How can you guarantee that I won't have problems with permits and inspections? I mean, you're just a neighborhood HOA, right? Margaret's eyes narrowed. She was starting to realize that I was asking more questions than a scared homeowner should be asking. We have relationships with the right people, she said carefully. What kind of relationships? The kind that ensure our residents don't face unnecessary bureaucratic harassment. You mean you bribe city officials? The room went completely silent. Margaret, Sandra, and Robert all stared at me with expressions that could have frozen water. I think you misunderstood what I said, Margaret replied slowly. Did I? Because it sounds like you're running a protection racket. You threaten homeowners with fake fines and bureaucratic harassment unless they pay you money, and then you promise to protect them from problems that you're creating yourself. Margaret stood up abruptly. I think this meeting is over. Actually, I said, standing up too, I think this meeting is just getting started. That's when Detective Rodriguez and his team burst through the door. Police. Everyone stay where you are. Margaret's face went through about 6 different expressions in 2 seconds, confusion, anger, fear, and finally a look of pure hatred directed at me. Margaret Walsh, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, conspiracy, breaking and entering, and making terroristic threats, Detective Rodriguez announced as he put handcuffs on her. This is entrapment. Margaret screamed. You can't do this. Actually, we can, Detective Rodriguez replied calmly. You just confessed to multiple felonies while being recorded. Sandra and Robert were also being arrested by the other officers. Sandra was crying, and Robert kept saying, this is all a misunderstanding. We're just volunteers. As Margaret was being led out in handcuffs, she turned to look at me one last time. You have no idea what you've done, she snarled. This isn't over. Yeah, it is, I replied. And Margaret? You might want to start looking for a new office. Your lease is terminated effective immediately, and you owe me $4,800 in back rent. The look of shock on her face was priceless. Even as she was being arrested, she couldn't believe that the person she had tried to scam was actually her landlord. Detective Rodriguez came over to me as his team finished processing the scene. Tommy, that was perfect. We got everything we needed on tape. So what happens now? Now we search this office and gather all the evidence of their scam. Then we start contacting all the people they've stolen money from and begin the process of getting their money back. And what about Margaret's threat that this isn't over? Detective Rodriguez smiled. With the evidence we have, she's looking at 5 to 10 years in prison. By the time she gets out, this will definitely be over. As the police led Margaret, Sandra, and Robert away, I stood in their empty office looking around at all the fake certificates and official-looking documents they had used to intimidate and steal from my neighbors. But the best part wasn't that we had caught them. The best part was what happened next. Mrs. Henderson arrived with about 20 other neighbors who had been victimized by the fake HOA. When they saw Margaret being put into the police car, they started cheering and hugging each other. "Tommy!" Mrs. Henderson called out, running up to me with tears of joy in her eyes. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected her. "All of us together." The young couple from the end of the block, the Williamses, came up to thank me. "We thought we'd lost our $6,000 forever," Mrs. Williams said. "We were talking about having to move because we couldn't afford any more of their fines." "Well, you won't have to worry about that anymore," I assured her. Detective Rodriguez came over with good news. "Tommy, we found detailed records of everyone they scammed in their filing cabinets. It looks like they kept meticulous records, probably for tax evasion purposes. We should be able to get everyone's money back." "How much money are we talking about?" "Over $200,000 from more than 50 families." I couldn't believe it. These criminals had stolen over $200,000 from hard-working families, elderly people, and young couples just trying to live peacefully in their homes. But here's the really amazing part of the story. After Margaret and her crew were arrested, something beautiful happened in Sunset Grove. Without the fake HOA terrorizing everyone, the neighbors started actually talking to each other and working together. Mrs. Henderson organized a block party to celebrate. The Williamses started a real community garden where Margaret had claimed she was going to build a fake park. Mr. Johnson from next door helped me fix my broken back door window and wouldn't accept any payment for his work. "This is what community is supposed to feel like," he said as we finished installing the new glass. Within a week, Detective Rodriguez called with even better news. Margaret's ex-husband had provided so much evidence that the district attorney was able to file charges against her in 3 other states where she had run similar scams. "She's going to be in prison for a very long time," he told me. "And Tommy, because of your bravery in exposing this, we've been able to help dozens of other communities that were being victimized by similar scams." But the story gets even better than that. 3 months later, I got a letter in the mail from the county courthouse. Margaret Walsh, Sandra Mills, and Robert Chen had all pled guilty to multiple felonies and were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 3 to 8 years. More importantly, they were ordered to pay back every penny they had stolen, plus interest and penalties. Every single neighbor who had been scammed got their money back. Mrs. Rodriguez got her $4,000 back. The Williamses got their $6,000 back. In total, over 50 families were made whole again. And here's the most amazing part: the real estate company that had sold me my house heard about what happened and offered me a job as a community relations specialist, helping other neighborhoods deal with HOA problems and scams. "What you did took real courage," the company president told me. "We need people like you helping protect homeowners from predators like Margaret Walsh." I accepted the job, and within a year, I had helped shut down 3 other fake HOA scams in nearby counties. It turned out that Margaret's operation was part of a much larger network of criminals who were targeting communities all over the region. But the best reward wasn't the new job or the recognition. It was the neighborhood itself. Sunset Grove became everything I had dreamed it would be when I first saw that house with the blue shutters. Kids played in the streets again without fear. Neighbors looked out for each other. People waved when they saw you walking by. Mrs. Henderson became like a grandmother to me, always checking to make sure I was eating enough and offering to help with household projects. The Williamses invited me over for dinner every Sunday. Mr. Johnson and I started a weekend lawn care service to help elderly neighbors maintain their properties. One evening, about 6 months after Margaret's arrest, I was sitting on my front porch reading a book when Mrs. Henderson came over with a plate of cookies. "Tommy," she said, sitting down in the chair next to me, "I want you to know something. What you did didn't just save us money. You saved our community." "We all did it together, Mrs. Henderson." "No, dear. You had the courage to stand up when the rest of us were too scared. You risked your safety to protect people you barely knew. That's not just courage, that's heroism." I looked around at the neighborhood, my neighborhood, with its tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors and children playing safely in their front yards. You know what the best part is? I told her. What's that? Margaret Walsh thought she could destroy our community with fear and intimidation. But instead, she brought us all together and made us stronger than ever. Mrs. Henderson smiled. Your parents would be so proud of you. And sitting there on my front porch, in the house I had worked so hard to buy, surrounded by neighbors who had become like family, I knew she was right. Sometimes the best way to find your home isn't just buying a house, it's standing up for the people who share it with you. 2 years after Margaret Walsh was sentenced to prison, I thought the whole nightmare was finally behind us. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning when Detective Rodriguez called me with news that made my blood run cold. Tommy, Margaret Walsh is trying to orchestrate something from prison. We intercepted letters she's been sending to associates on the outside, and your name is mentioned several times. I was at my new office. The community relations job had grown into my own consulting firm helping neighborhoods across 3 states deal with HOA fraud, when I got that call. My assistant, Jenny, noticed my face go pale. What kind of something? I asked Detective Rodriguez. We're not entirely sure yet, but the letters mention unfinished business and making things right. We think she's trying to coordinate some kind of retaliation against you. My heart sank. I had hoped that Margaret's prison sentence would be the end of this story, but apparently, some people never learn. Detective, what do we do? We're putting you back under surveillance, and we're investigating everyone she's been in contact with. In the meantime, I need you to be extra careful. Don't go anywhere alone, and let us know if you notice anything unusual. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, staring out the window at the busy street below. For 2 years, I had been helping other communities fight HOA scams, traveling around the region, speaking at conferences, and even appearing on local news shows to warn people about predatory schemes. I had thought I was making a real difference. But now Margaret Walsh was trying to reach out from behind bars to cause more trouble. That evening, I drove home to Sunset Grove feeling nervous for the first time in months. The neighborhood looked exactly the same, beautiful tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, children playing in their front yards. But knowing that someone was potentially planning to harm me made everything feel different. Mrs. Henderson was watering her flowers when I pulled into my driveway. She waved and walked over, just like she had done hundreds of times before. Tommy, dear, you look worried. Is everything all right? I didn't want to scare her, but Mrs. Henderson had become like family to me, and I couldn't lie to her. Margaret Walsh is trying to cause problems again, even from prison, I explained. The police think she might be planning some kind of retaliation. Mrs. Henderson's face hardened in a way I had never seen before. That woman just doesn't know when to quit, does she? Apparently not. Well, she's picked the wrong neighborhood to mess with again. We stood up to her once, and we'll do it again if we have to. Her fierce loyalty touched my heart, but I was also worried about putting my neighbors in danger again. Mrs. Henderson, I think maybe I should stay somewhere else for a while. If Margaret's people come looking for me, I don't want anyone else to get hurt. Nonsense, she said firmly. Tommy Chen, you are part of this community, and we protect our own. If some criminals want to threaten you, they'll have to go through all of us first. That night, I barely slept. Every little sound outside made me jump. The wind rustling through the oak trees sounded like footsteps. A car driving by sounded like someone casing the neighborhood. Around 3 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Detective Rodriguez. Tommy, we've got a situation. We arrested 2 men trying to break into your old rental building on Commerce Street. They had detailed floor plans and were specifically looking for your office files. Are they connected to Margaret? We're still questioning them, but it looks like it. The good news is we caught them before they could steal or destroy anything. The bad news is this confirms that Margaret is definitely orchestrating something from prison. What's the plan? We're going to increase patrols around your house and your office. We're also going to try to trace the network of people she's been communicating with. But Tommy, this might take some time to resolve. The next few days were tense. I went to work with a police escort, and there were unmarked cars watching my house around the clock. My neighbors all knew something was going on, and they rallied around me in the most amazing way. Mr. Johnson organized a neighborhood watch program where someone was always keeping an eye on my house. The Williamses offered to let me stay with them if I felt unsafe. Even families I barely knew stopped by to offer their support. This is what Margaret Walsh never understood, Mrs. Henderson told me one evening as we sat on my front porch, watching the neighborhood kids play. She thought she could control people through fear and intimidation. But real communities are built on love and mutual support. On Friday morning, Detective Rodriguez called with a breakthrough. "Tommy, we've identified the person Margaret has been coordinating with. It's her ex-business partner, a man named Vincent Murphy. He's been running similar scams in other states, and apparently, Margaret promised him information about your consulting business in exchange for taking care of her problem." Taking care of her problem meaning me? That's what we think. But here's the good news, we've located Vincent Murphy, and we're moving to arrest him this afternoon. And the two men who tried to break into my building? They've agreed to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. They're giving us everything about Margaret's operation from prison. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe this nightmare really was almost over. But that afternoon, something happened that I never could have predicted. I was in my office, catching up on paperwork with Jenny, when she buzzed me on the intercom. "Tommy, there's a woman here to see you. She says her name is Patricia Walsh." Patricia Walsh. Margaret's sister. My first instinct was to call Detective Rodriguez immediately, but something in Jenny's voice made me pause. "Jenny, does she seem dangerous?" "No, actually, she seems really upset. She's been crying, and she keeps saying she needs to apologize for something." Against my better judgment, I decided to see what Patricia Walsh wanted. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes that looked nothing like Margaret's cold stare. When I walked into the reception area, she immediately started crying harder. "Mr. Chen, I am so sorry for what my sister has put you through," she said through her tears. "Mrs. Walsh, I think maybe you should speak with the police instead of me. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I have information that could help stop Margaret once and for all." I looked at Jenny, who nodded encouragingly. Against my better judgment, I invited Patricia into my office. "Mr. Chen, I need you to know that I had no idea what Margaret was doing until after she was arrested," Patricia began. "When I found out about the scam, I was horrified. But now she's trying to drag me into her revenge scheme, and I can't let that happen." "What do you mean?" "She's been calling me from prison, trying to get me to help her hurt you and your business. She wants me to spread lies about your consulting firm, file false complaints with the state licensing board, even hire people to vandalize your office. And you're telling me this because I'm not my sister. I believe in doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Margaret has spent her whole life hurting people, and I won't be part of that anymore." Patricia pulled out a folder full of letters and documents. "These are copies of everything Margaret has sent me from prison. Letters, phone call transcripts, names and contact information for everyone she's been working with. I want to give them to the police to help stop her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Margaret's own sister was turning against her criminal schemes. "Patricia, why are you risking yourself to help me?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Because what you did was heroic. You stood up to bullies and protected innocent people. My sister tried to destroy communities, and you saved them. I want to be on the right side for once in my life." I called Detective Rodriguez immediately, and within an hour, Patricia was at the police station giving a full statement and turning over all of Margaret's communications. The information Patricia provided led to arrests in 4 different states. Margaret's entire network of criminal associates was rounded up, and several other HOA scams were shut down before they could victimize more families. But the most satisfying part came 2 weeks later, when Detective Rodriguez called with the final update. "Tommy, Margaret Walsh has been charged with additional felonies for conspiracy and attempting to obstruct justice from prison. Her sentence has been extended by another 5 years, and she's been transferred to a maximum security facility where her communications will be much more restricted. So it's really over this time. It's really over. Vincent Murphy and his associates are all in custody, and we've seized all their assets. The money they stole will be returned to their victims, just like we did with Margaret's original scam. That evening, the entire neighborhood gathered in my backyard for an impromptu celebration. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous potato salad, the Johnsons grilled hamburgers and hot dogs, and the Williams family provided homemade ice cream. As I looked around at all the faces of people who had become my family over the past 2 years, I realized something profound. Margaret Walsh had tried to destroy me twice now, and both times, she had only made my life better. Her first scam had brought the neighborhood together and led to my career helping other communities. Her second attempt had shown me just how much my neighbors cared about me and had resulted in shutting down criminal operations across multiple states. "Tommy," Mrs. Henderson said, coming up to me with a glass of lemonade, "I have something to tell you." "What's that?" "Patricia Walsh came to see me yesterday. She wanted to thank our neighborhood for showing her what real community looks like. That was nice of her. She also said something that I think you should know. She said that Margaret is furious because her plan backfired so completely. Margaret thought that by trying to hurt you, she would get revenge. Instead, she ended up helping you save even more people and communities." I laughed. Margaret never was very good at thinking through the consequences of her actions. Patricia also said that Margaret finally understands that she can't win against someone who has an entire community supporting them. As the sun set over Sunset Grove, I stood on my back deck watching my neighbors enjoying themselves in my yard. Children were playing games on the lawn, teenagers were telling jokes by the grill, and adults were sharing stories and laughter around picnic tables. This wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a family. 6 months later, I got a letter that put the perfect ending on this whole incredible story. It was from the mayor of our city, informing me that I was being recognized with the Community Hero Award for my work fighting HOA fraud and protecting homeowners across the region. The award ceremony was held in the same building where Margaret Walsh had been sentenced to prison. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But the best part of the ceremony wasn't the award or the recognition. It was seeing the auditorium filled with hundreds of people whose lives had been changed by the work we had done together, families who had gotten their money back, neighborhoods that had been freed from criminal HOAs, and community leaders who had learned how to protect their residents from scams. Mrs. Henderson sat in the front row, beaming with pride. The Johnsons and the Williamses were there, along with dozens of other neighbors from Sunset Grove. Detective Rodriguez was there, along with police officers from 6 different jurisdictions who had worked on related cases. But the most meaningful moment came when Patricia Walsh approached me after the ceremony. "Mr. Chen," she said, "I wanted you to know that I've started volunteering with a victims' rights organization, helping people who have been hurt by scams like my sisters." "That's wonderful, Patricia. I also wanted to tell you that this whole experience has taught me something important. It's never too late to choose to do the right thing, even when your family is doing the wrong thing. Your sister could learn something from that attitude." Patricia smiled sadly. "Maybe someday she will. But even if she doesn't, I'm going to keep trying to make up for the harm she caused." As I drove home to Sunset Grove that night, my Community Hero Award sitting on the passenger seat, I thought about everything that had happened since I first pulled into the driveway of 247 Maple Street 3 years ago. I had started out just trying to buy my dream house. But what I had found was so much more than that. I had found my purpose, my community, and my family. Margaret Walsh had tried to use fear and intimidation to control people and steal their money. But she had ended up teaching all of us the most important lesson of all: when good people stand together, bullies can't win. Today, my consulting firm has helped shut down over 30 fraudulent HOA operations across 7 states. We've recovered more than $2 million for victims and helped dozens of communities reclaim their neighborhoods from criminals. But more importantly, I still live at 247 Maple Street in Sunset Grove. Mrs. Henderson still brings me cookies and checks on me like a grandmother. The Johnsons still invite me over for Sunday dinner. The Williamses and I still maintain the community garden that grew where Margaret Walsh claimed she was going to build a fake park. Every morning when I wake up in my house with the blue shutters, I look out my window at the tree-lined street where children play safely and neighbors wave to each other, and I remember that sometimes the best way to find your home isn't just buying a house, it's standing up for the people who share it with you. And Margaret Walsh? She's currently serving an 8-year sentence in maximum security. Word is that she spends most of her time in the prison library, reading books about real estate law and community management. Maybe she's finally learning how things are supposed to work. Patricia tells me that Margaret still gets angry letters from victims and communities she tried to destroy. But she also gets letters from people thanking her for inadvertently bringing their neighborhoods together and inspiring them to create real, caring communities. I like to think that somewhere deep down, Margaret Walsh has learned that when you try to tear people apart with fear and greed, you sometimes end up showing them how much stronger they are when they stand together. As for me, I'm exactly where I belong, surrounded by the best neighbors anyone could ask for, doing work that makes a real difference in people's lives. And every time someone tries to tell me that one person can't make a difference against powerful bullies, I just smile and tell them the story of how a fake HOA tried to trick me minutes after I arrived. Too bad I was the one who collected their rent. Because sometimes, the person the bullies choose to pick on turns out to be exactly the wrong person to mess with. And sometimes, that's exactly what the world needs. Thanks for following Tommy's incredible journey from new homeowner to community hero. If this story inspired you to stand up against bullies and protect your own community, make sure you're subscribed for more amazing true stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Remember, when good people stand together, there's no limit to what we can accomplish.